Good afternoon, how are you? Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. We are packed today, and we're very honored to have a potential presidential candidate in our studio with very limited time, so we are pretty much going to get straight to it. Governor Tim Pawlenty, welcome to the Simon Conway Show here on News Radio 1040 WHO.
Simon, it's great to be with you, and congratulations on the relatively new gig. Sounds like you're doing great.
Thank you very much. It's truly an honor being at the station where Ronald Reagan started work. So it doesn't get much better than that, Governor.
That's for sure.
We do have to get straight into it because our time is very limited today. So let's start with the issues of the day, two of them, okay? Did the president miss a trick at the end of his, just very briefly, I've said he got it 100% right. But did he miss a trick at the end of his announcement that bin Laden was dead by not saying, and we're going to start to bring the troops home in 30 days?
Well, as it relates to Afghanistan, there is a connection between bin Laden and Afghanistan. That's where they planned 9/11, but we're now 10 years removed in a lot of geography between bin Laden and Afghanistan. So what's our interest in Afghanistan? It's this: to make sure that al-Qaeda and no other terrorist group reforms the ability to have the capacity to hurt the United States or our national security interests. That doesn't mean we need to stick around Afghanistan forever or rebuild their country. By the way, I've been there 3 times, as recently as last fall. But it does mean we need to have enough capacity there or nearby so that if we identify a threat to the country, we need to be able to identify and defeat it quickly. So when I was there with General Petraeus last fall, he said this: Governor, I need 2 years to reverse the momentum of the insurgency and get this thing stabilized.
Yes.
And since then, he's publicly said he thinks he can reach that metric or measurement even sooner.
Yes.
So there's hope. And I think we have to make this decision based on the actual threat to the United States and the actual conditions on the ground.
See, I asked the question because, today, literally today, we have an Iowa Guardsman. There's visitation for an Iowa Guardsman, and we had 2 last week. And it's like we're in Afghanistan with a president who says, I don't like the word victory. So I'm not even clear if he knows what the mission is. Now, the original mission was absolutely, let's go get bin Laden. Well, we got him. Great job. Let's come home.
Yeah. Well, I think we just want to make sure. There's been 10 years worth of treasure, blood, loss of life, incredible commitment. And in our Minnesota National Guard, of course, we lost many, many people, and I attended most of those funerals. And, of course, I've seen those families and the heartbreak and the suffering that they go through. So should we reduce our troops in Afghanistan as soon as possible? Absolutely. And I think that process can begin and continue. However, we don't want to go so far so fast that we dishonor the 10 years of work that's been done and allow a threat to rematerialize. So let's be smart about how and when we do it.
Okay. Waterboarding apparently played a role in us capturing bin Laden or shooting and killing bin Laden, depending on which part of the administration you're actually listening to, but certainly the CIA director made it very clear that it did. Is that something that we should just not take off the table, or in fact, if you became president, put it back on the table?
Simon, it's a great question, and in fact, it's going to be revealed, I think, or it seems like press is reporting that a number of things that many people oppose, namely enhanced interrogation techniques like waterboarding, like surveillance mechanisms, like Gitmo, may have contributed significantly and directly to the information that led us to bin Laden. We'll see as the evidence unfolds.
The director of the CIA is saying waterboarding played a part.
But if that's the case, then I think the critics of those things should be asked, in light of that evidence, in light of those facts, do you still oppose it? I personally support enhanced interrogation techniques.
Okay, so that's a very, very clear answer. And it just depends which part of the administration that you ask. But certainly the CIA director was very clear with Brian Williams on NBC last night. They played a part. We're going to take. You're against raising the debt limit, Governor, and I happen to support you in that fact. But they keep telling us that if we do that, the United States defaults. So they're just trying to scare us.
I think the president and his administration has set up a false choice between default and raising the debt ceiling when, in fact, we know, in fact, they've admitted it now, you can at least delay this issue by paying our outside creditors first with the existing cash flow, and then have the debate be about what remaining internal obligations should we fund or not fund, or fund higher or fund lower. And my argument was, if they're saying we don't have enough time to really fix the problem because the crisis is now, that they can manage cash flow in a way without defaulting, paying all the outside creditors, to buy some time so we can have the real debate about fixing the spending crisis. And it's an out of control, reckless, irresponsible crisis. Fix it now.
It's a disease.
Not a year from now, not 3 years from now, not 5 years. Fix it now. So my point was, you can take away this threat of default by passing legislation or issuing a directive to the Treasury to pay all the outside creditors first from within existing cash flow, and then have the debate about the rest after you take away that issue.
It's such a strange thing because it's called a debt limit or a debt ceiling, and they're saying, and we need to raise it.
They've raised it 75 times since 1962. What kind of ceiling is it if they raise it 75 times?
It's absolute nonsense, and certainly we the people are so sick of it and so sick of the DC speak about it. It's incredible to me. Then you've got something like the Government Accountability Office. Who knew we had one of those? But we do, and they've did this audit which has produced so much waste. The waste they've discovered is just incredible. And we got the report, and nothing's happened. There's $500 billion in there that they identified with a very, very thin look. They haven't even looked deep.
Yeah. The report is devastating, but it confirms everything that I think you know and your listeners know, which is there's massive overlap, massive duplication, massive waste, massive fraud in the federal government. And they've got too many agencies trying to do too many of the same things too inefficiently at too great of an expense, and it needs to be streamlined. By the way, there's a group here in Iowa that is focused on government reform and streamlining government through something called Lean Six Sigma, and they're going to have a very large campaign as part of the 2012 caucuses here to get candidates like me to sign up for their approach, which I've used in Minnesota, and I fully commit it and fully support it.
Okay, what do you think about abolishing the IRS and replacing that with a fair tax?
Well, I'm open to the fair tax, but I have to put a couple of qualifiers on it in this regard. The income tax is in the U.S. Constitution, so unless you're
an amendment,
unless you're able to abolish that part of the U.S. Constitution, if you move to a national sales tax on the theory that you're going to eliminate all other taxes and you don't change the Constitution, you're going to end up with both. And that's worrisome.
But you have to change the Constitution, but that's not something that we can't do. We absolutely can do it. We've done it before.
That's right, but it's
we
not
invented
easy.
Prohibition, and then we got rid of Prohibition. And both of those required a change to the Constitution. So we can do it. The question is, are we going to have a president in Tim Pawlenty who's got the will to do it?
Well, I've said this. I want a flatter, fairer, simpler tax code, and I'm open to how to do that. But the other thing about the fair tax to keep in mind is, in order to make it work, if you do the math, depending on whose numbers, you got to have somewhere between a 25 and 35 cent sales tax, or
depending on who's doing the numbers, I accept
on everything.
Yeah, but you see, what they're not taking into account, Governor, I'm sorry to cut across you because this is about you, not about me, but what they're not taking into account is that right now, and it's one of the big complaints of the left, is, people like one of your potential opponents, Donald Trump, employs very, very high-level accountants and avoids a load of tax. Right. Well, if he wants to go out and buy the $1 million yacht, he can't avoid it with a fair tax because there's a sales tax. So actually our take will go up, and maybe that rate can come down.
Yeah, I'm open to it. I just flagged those two issues. It would be a very high rate, and we have to also then abolish the income tax. The other thing, though, I would suggest to you is we can achieve some of the same goals by getting rid of all the special deals in the income tax, both corporate and personal. We have all these special exemptions, deductions, and credits. And so when you have a company like GE, for example, who pays no income tax, the way they do that is they take advantage of all the special deals that they get, but many other companies don't. So I think a fair approach would be to lower the rate for everybody as far as we possibly can go, and then clean out of the tax code as many of those special deals as possible, so we have a flatter tax.
It's clearly too complicated because we got a Secretary of the Treasury that actually couldn't get a regular job at the Treasury because of his own TurboTax issues.
Right.
It's true, though. He couldn't get a regular job at the Treasury, and he's the Secretary of Treasury. And we got this incredibly complicated code that if even he can't understand it, how are the rest of us supposed to cope?
I agree. So I think we share the goal of getting a simpler, fairer, flatter tax system. How to do that, we give a couple of competing alternatives. But the fair tax, I think, is intriguing in its simplicity, but it has some complication to it. In the income tax would still exist. The sales tax rate would be extraordinarily high to make it work. And then, of course, when you have people of modest income, in order to mitigate against that, if you're charging 25 to 35 cent sales tax on everything, then you have to do what's called a prebate. You have to pre-send or rebate some of the money back to those individuals. Because
there are ways to do it,
but it's not quite as simple as some people lead it to believe.
In the time that we have left to us, which is not very long, I've got two more questions for you. Donald Trump, one of your potential opponents, seemed to resonate with the people. I don't particularly want to talk about the issue that he chose, the whole birth certificate thing, but I think it was the way he went after the president. It was real leadership. Can we expect to see you going after the president in such a way?
Yeah, I do all the time, and I say positive things about Donald Trump. I think he's smart, successful. He obviously doesn't get to where he's been without a lot of skill and a lot of get up and go. But I also want to make sure everybody knows that there's different styles. And Ronald Reagan, for example, used a very different style. And I remind people, don't confuse being loud with being strong.
Yep.
Usually if you get into a bar or something, the loudest person isn't usually the one with the strength.
The one you want to go have a beer with.
No, well, I'm just talking about, and I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm just saying people should not confuse being loud with being strong. Ronald Reagan was about as strong as a leader as you're going to encounter, and I think one of the greatest presidents in the history of the country.
I would agree with you.
But he was a hopeful, optimistic, fair-minded person.
Okay. In the time, the 1 minute that we have left, there's a small field at the moment. We expect it to get substantially larger within, I would say, the next 6 weeks. How are you going to differentiate yourself from your Republican opposition?
Well, a number of ways. One is everybody's got their own life story, and I grew up in a meatpacking town and have a blue-collar background. That's number one. Number two, I've got a record in an executive position. Many of the other people who may be running don't have that same experience.
Yes.
And three, I've got a vision for the future of America that's going to be different, I think, in terms of issue positions and the like. And again, I'm not as well known as some of the others who ran last time, but we got a lot of upside because as we get known, we're making good progress. Okay, well, Governor, I know you have to get to the airport, and we have a bridge that's out, so a little detour, so we have to let you go. But you will come back and sit in this studio for an hour, I'm led to believe, in the coming weeks and months. Simon, thanks a lot for having me, and appreciate it, and great luck with the show. Thank you very much for coming, and there you go, Governor Tim Pawlenty.